Hello, everyone. Welcome to another IMG initiative series. Today we have Dr. Monica Verduzco-Gutierrez. She is the chair of the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at the Long School Medicine at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. She is also the medical director of critical illness recovery and neurorehabilitation at Warm Springs Rehabilitation Hospital in San Antonio and chief of the physical medicine and rehabilitation service line at University Health Hospital System. She is a fellow member of the American Academy of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, as well as on the board of trustees of the Association of Academic Physiatrists. Dr. Gutierrez excitedly moved to San Antonio to lead a distinguished department of rehabilitation medicine in 2020. Her area of clinical expertise is the care of patients with traumatic brain injury, stroke rehabilitation, interventional spasticity management, and now post-acute sequelae of SARS-CoV-2. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, she has developed 2 post-COVID recovery clinics to aid in the rehabilitation recovery of patients with functional mobility and cognitive deficits after infections with COVID-19. She has over 100 publications in these areas, as well as topics related to health equity and inclusion. She's also a sub-investigator in NIH recovered trial through her institution, which is one of the 17 hubs in the country to be part of the initiative to study long COVID. After this amazing introduction, please, Dr. Monica, tell us more about you. This is amazing. By the way, she just had a book published. She's doing a lot. So thank you for joining us. Tell us more about you, about your hobbies, like all of this you do.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm excited. I know some people are live, some will listen to it later. Thanks for engaging and wanting to hear a little bit about my story and about, about PM&R and what does it take to, excel in PM&R. So a little bit more about myself, that's kind of the bio for the work. I am Latina. I am Mexican American. I grew up in South Texas in the border area and was in one of the pathway programs when I was in college. So I was able to, it was very helpful for me to do that and to be able to get into medical school that way. And then did my residency in PM&R in Houston with Baylor College of Medicine, and then started working in academic medicine. And some of that, was I'm the first person in my family to be a doctor. And so everything was very much like trying to navigate it on my own without any help from my family or, understanding what the process was or even what it meant, even to go into academic medicine, what that meant. Kind of trying to learn from mentors or from people who are around me, just not having that kind of lived experience, and just thankful to still be able to get where I am today, just because, yes, my family was also very supportive and loving of that. I am married, and I'm almost married for 20 years in a few months, and we're going on a trip in a couple of weeks to celebrate early our 20-year anniversary. I have 2 kids, 16 and 14, and they're both in the same high school this year. So I lived a long time in, of course, South Texas and Houston, and then San Antonio now. And I have family here, and of course, it's closer to my family in South Texas. And I'm in PM&R, which again is sometimes a specialty that a lot of people don't know about or know what I do as a physiatrist. And I have a specialty in brain injury medicine and board certified in brain injury medicine as well. I know there's a lot to say, but that's where I'll start about me. Oh, and then fun things I like to do. One of my friends was talking about like, oh, we have to have hobbies. We have to have hobbies so our brains don't go. And so we run, I'm a runner. I've been a runner. And now I'm maybe not as competitive as runner as I used to be, because I used to be very even growing up, I was an okay runner. And then as a master has done marathons and gone to Boston Marathon and done like USA track and field masters, national meets and such. And now I just kind of run to do something and to stay active. And then I go to the gym, and my husband thinks I need to do some more squats. So I'm going to be lifting more weights, heavier weights, do some squats. That's a little, oh, and my other thing that I like to do, my other hobby is thrift shopping.
Yeah, it sounds like you do a lot. I definitely I'm impressed. I think all of us here, all of my friends here are like listening and like, oh, you do so much stuff. So Deb here has some questions for you too.
Okay.
Yeah, like as chair of rehabilitation, could you share like what the most memorable experience that you have?
Okay, so I will. And first I will just explain what chair is, because probably first it's, it depends on what your background is and what you know about academic medicine or not. What is a chair? Probably when I was a resident and I was first applying for jobs, when someone said like, what would you see yourself doing 12 years from now? I wouldn't have been like, I'm going to be the chair. I almost even didn't know what a chair was. And also sometimes when people hear, like when I say, oh, I'm the chair, they think I'm like a chair like this and not a chair in an academic department. So the chair is usually the head of an academic department in an academic medical center and a medical school. And so I'm at the Long School of Medicine, like I said, at UT Health San Antonio, and the department's rehabilitation medicine, which is mostly PM&R specialist. We have a very large residency program. We have orthotics and prosthetic specialists. And then I'm the head of the department, so the chair of the department. Sometimes some departments will have vice chairs of different things, like we have a vice chair of research, we have a vice chair of clinical operations. Before I was a chair in my old institute, I was a vice chair of quality compliance and patient safety, so got some experience with being a vice chair before I was a chair. So that's kind of one thing. So a couple things about, maybe a memorable experience about being a chair. The first thing was even becoming chair. So when the position opened up, where I was in, like I said, in Houston before, and it came across my desk or my email or something, and it said, they're looking for a chair of PM&R, but they were looking for someone, it said on there that they wanted someone that was a tenured professor. So at that point, I was an associate professor, which is the one before becoming a professor, and I was not on the tenured track. So I almost didn't apply because I thought, well, I didn't meet all the criteria to be the chair. And I had talked to one of my mentors about it, and she said, well, why don't you just go for it? You meet a lot of the criteria, because to be a chair, you kind of have to have diverse experiences and understand what it is like to run a department. So I'd already been a medical director of a major rehabilitation hospital at Tier. I was their brain and stroke medical director. So I understood the rehab and the inpatient part. I was also a medical director of the outpatient clinic. So I understood the outpatient part. I was in the medical executive committee of our large level 1 trauma center. So I understood like hospital systems in general. I had been the chair of the faculty senate when I was in Houston. So I understood what it was like, faculty affairs issues and issues that faculty had to deal with. And I'd been a fellowship program director for the Brain Injury Fellowship. So I had a lot of different experiences that I said, well, I have a lot to bring to be a chair. And maybe if they say no, or they say, no, she's not a tenured professor, she's like, why? Just go for it. Like, it's not gonna hurt you. Like, if I don't get the job, it was an experience, and okay, I have a good job anyways. There was not a lot to lose, but I went through the process, and all those experiences mattered and really helped, including even the DEI work I did was very helpful to becoming chair. So this is great. I went through this process. I did end up becoming the chair. I had to learn a lot about, what does it take? What should you ask for when you're going to become a chair? And then the other memorable experience is that the first day that I started was April Fool's Day of 2020. And that was literally like the start of COVID pandemic when everything was shutting down. So it was like April Fool's, big joke on you. Yes, you're the chair, but you know, things are shut down, people are distressed, clinics are closed. Oh, we don't have all the like budget we promised you because everything's, you know, shut down right now. You can't recruit like we told you because again, nothing's even open. So you can't even bring doctors in because where are they going to work? So that was a big shock, very, you know, memorable in that way. And also when I moved, my family didn't move initially with me. I just moved first. So that was some of something that I had to, but then that turned into like, okay, this is a thing that happened that's like, wow, things are closed. And then I had to learn from there, like, well, how do I pivot from there? How do we grow from these situations that seem like they're really bleak? And then some of it was like, how do we make ourselves as physiatrists become essential? You know, I think it's an essential specialty in a pandemic, and knowing that the history of physiatry, some of the history comes from wars and taking care of soldiers who are injured after wars, and then also comes from another pandemic, the polio pandemic. So also it was like figuring out that, okay, after polio, we took care of these people who had disabilities during that time. And then a lot of the polio hospitals became rehabilitation hospitals, and rehab specialists helped during that pandemic. So rehab specialists are going to help during this pandemic. So we made ourselves very relevant also during COVID-19, saying like, okay, we're going to treat patients who need rehabilitation after being so sick and having, you know, lung damage and heart damage and lung transplants, and we're going to rehabilitate them throughout the continuum of care. And then also made ourselves very, very relevant regarding long COVID, and saying, well, now patients have all these issues after they have COVID. And I said, there are a lot, those issues were just like my brain injury patients. They have, you know, concentration issues, brain fog, fatigue, they had dizziness, they had smell problems. Those are all things that I was already used to helping patients manage in a team setting. So then also, you know, became now a national and international expert in long COVID, and have a long COVID clinics in our department.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear, like how you model and adapt it to your to this position and how you navigate all these hardships. And we're very grateful to have all this insight about what physiatry does. Maybe I can speak for my personal experience. IMG from Mexico, we don't really have those kinds of things available for patients. Like after disease comes rehabilitation. So what do we do next? And speaking about modeling oneself and adapting, in your opinion, what should medical students from any part of the world, from the US or IMGs, should do, or how should they model their experiences to be a better candidates for a PMR residency?
Right. So how to model experiences. I think I know that just trying to get experiences and exposures into PM&R as much as possible. And I know sometimes that's easier said than done, because there's some places where it's like, oh, we're full, or we only take, you know, US medical students who are students, even ones that already graduated who are US can't even get in. And so it's kind of having to look and say where maybe that you can try to get experiences with. The ones who don't have such rules are like the private practices. So there might be a private practice PM&R doctor who's a medical director, or who does inpatient rehab rounds, who would be open to having IMG students or graduates already, shadowing them and working with them in their clinics, or in their inpatient rehab units. And so it's kind of like, yes, experiences matter, trying to take advantage of rotations, knowing that, you know, I understand that there's a limitation. Also getting involved in the societies. You know, there are AAPM&R, AAP, there's some osteopathic ones that have different, designations for people to be involved and to, maybe go to the conference, present at the conference, take a poster at the conference, meet people at the conference, just showing that, you have an interest in the field and getting that experience. Of course, research work is nice. I know that's not real easy to say, like, oh, just do some research, but it's not also but if you have the opportunity to do it, then that's also something that would help an application. I don't know, hopefully I answered.
Yeah, definitely. I think that all these application processes, they ask you to have like be very well rounded. But as you said, research is very difficult. What do you think, Deb?
No, yeah, it's not easy. I got super admired for how you did on the COVID, like with your work. It's really admirable. And I have a question that is more general, as we have like different IMGs like applying for different residence programs and not just PMNR, like internal medicine and other ones. Like if you could tell us how important you think are the personal statement, and like what kind of stories like show you more interest when you read.
Mm-hmm. So I love the personal statements. I will, when you get a part of the, when you're from this side where you're a program director or you're an interviewer or whatever, when you get the application package and you get several things. You get a personal statement, you get like their letters of recommendation, you get their, ERAS thing, you get their CV, all these different parts. I always go to the personal statement first. Probably other people don't, but I'm one, when I review, I go to the personal statement first. And most are fine and average, and then there's some where it's like, oh, this is really good and it's really strong. And I don't always want it to be like your trauma or trauma porn kind of thing, but I do want you to tell your story still. And if there's something where people could look at other parts of your application and say, is that a red flag? But you explain it some in your statement, like, is started medical school, and then my family lost all money and I wasn't able to finish, and then I had to go back and work for them, and then I finished medical school years later. Then that's something like, oh, explain. It's not like you failed out the first time, or people are going to kind of wonder what happened. And so I'm always like, tell your story, tell it, have people review it. I want you to get multiple people to review it. Hopefully you can. I don't want you either to, I always see also those places that are preying on IMGs. Like they're like, oh, I'll review it, but you have to pay me for it, or I'll give you some advice. You're gonna have to so, are there places, that's where it's nice also to get on social media. So that way, maybe even asking on social media, or while you're in national societies, people who are in the societies would probably be happy to review, or current residents would be happy to review and give you feedback. And then you have to make sure that it is like clean, smooth, nice, no grammatical errors, those kind of things. Make sure it reads well, because that's also like, oh, they didn't even put enough time to review it, or they have these kind of grammatical errors. So, that's something also that goes in the personal statement. The other thing about the personal statement is like the people who are reading it know what the field is. So don't go into like spending a lot of time describing what, PMR is, or whatever field you're going to do, like what neurology is. Like, oh, I love that you get to treat bones and nerves and and explain what the field is. It's like, I know what PMR is, but maybe instead, like, the story of like why you got interested in it, why you think you're going to be successful in it, and what other life experiences will make you successful in the field that you want to go into. And so, and then the other thing, kind of part of a question, yes, you can customize the statement for the programs that you're really, really interested in and submit a different one. So if you're been living in Texas, then you can put something on there like, oh, I've been living in Texas, and so I love the state and I want to, continue to be in practice in Texas. Or if it's like, your program's in San Antonio and I have 3 family members who are there and a community that already know, you know, whatever it is, or I speak Spanish and I know that you serve a hospital that's the county hospital that serves a large percentage of Latino, Latinx population. So put that in there, because that's a consideration that programs look at and say, oh, look, they want to serve underserved populations. They speak Spanish. Oh, they have family in Texas. Because otherwise, sometimes it's like, why does this person from Iowa want to come to Texas? But if it's like, oh, they put in there why this is like a program that they really feel is for them, then that would make me, you know, more likely to want to bring them in for an interview or consider them, especially when there's so many applications. And you can, you know, customize all of them if you want.
Yeah, that's very true. Like sometimes we're wondering how can we customize our personal statement for certain programs, and definitely try to like if I mean in Texas here we have Blue Bonnets, HEB, and Buc-ee's. I saw you tweet about HEB, and definitely something that I would I would recommend everyone. It's a supermarket for people who do not know. But now, parenthesis aside, we also have this question about like what do you focus on more during interviews? Have you interviewed a candidate and you have seen, oh, this is a great asset. Maybe his or her application was not the best, but in your interview they do amazingly. What are like tips you can give us?
Yeah. So I guess the other thing is you know, I just talked a little bit about the program, the personal statement, but the whole thing is important too. You know, you want to make sure that when you ask for letters, so I'm going to jump to letters of recommendation, that when you're asking for them, that some actually say like, would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? Or you can say a strong letter of recommendation. You don't want to get one say, yeah, and then they write you a poor recommendation. Because then if someone reads that, they see a poor recommendation letter just because you felt like forced to get one from that person, that's going to be a negative. So sometimes they say, I'd rather see, you know, some people are like trying so hard, like, oh, I want to get 3 PM&R letters or 2 PM&R letters. And it's like, I'd rather you have one good one and then the other ones be good from another specialty than a good one and a not just a blah one. Then that's going to be more negative than 1 and then 2, like all good ones, even though it's from different specialties, then, you know, a good one and a bad one. So that's one thing to consider too, because I do look into the letters as well. The other thing in the letter, like for letters, I always will tell a student, at least ones that I write letters for, is give me a list of things that you want me to talk about, that stand out about you, that you're exceptionally proud of, and give me a list of, you know, 5 or 6 things so that I can make sure that I'm adding it into my letter too. So sometimes, you know, people will just be like, here's my CV, and then the CV is like traditional CVs. It's just like, I did this organization, I did this. But are you more proud of when you were in this organization, you did it for 4 years and you started a program in it and you served, you know, however many kids or whatever you did, like the actual, like the action or the outcome of what happened, and telling and helping the letter writer tell that story. And then what was the other question?
I think the other question was about, no, we can, as we are talking about this.
We have many in the chat actually. I think the first one is from Ambish. What about you, Bennett?
No, we asked about the interview, but then we kind of changed. But
yeah, the interview.
Yeah.
That's the interview. Okay, good. You see, I remember. All right. So the interviews are both, I say, like they're a blessing and a curse. Both now that they're all virtual, that they become virtual, and for the most part, most specialties are keeping virtual. So it's like, it's nice that they're virtual because that can save you money, because usually people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars to interview places. But now that also they're virtual and they're less expensive, yes, you have to like apply and that costs too. But since they're virtual, then actually the issue is that people who get all the interviews are usually the people that get all the interviews, and then they're taking the interviews. And so if you're someone that's maybe not a strong candidate, then you're going to have less options for interviews. But, you know, before, when people had to pay to go fly somewhere for different interviews, they probably weren't taking as many interviews. But now that you don't have to fly somewhere and you can just be in your home, then you know, some of them are harder to come by. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just making sure that you try to know something about the program before going in, you know, be on time, be engaged as much as possible, have questions, no matter what. Like, even if you asked everyone the same thing every time, you know, when someone says, and you still have, let's say there's like 3 more minutes and they're like, do you have questions? And don't say like, no, everyone answer my question, because then it just shows that you're not interested. Have a question. I don't care if you asked the person before or you already know the answer. Just find something to, oh, what do you think about, you know, the strength of the program, or what has been your best experience, or what is the best HEB in the town, you know, whatever. Like, also about HEB, the big store is, when we moved to San Antonio, my husband, like, one of the requirements was being a certain distance to HEB of our house. So we're close to 2, like we could walk to 2.
That's very true. Like, by the way, for everybody watching us on YouTube, we are not being sponsored by HEB.
I know, can we be sponsored by HEB? Yeah.
But it's a really nice one. It's very cheap. Honestly, that's something that most of us as IMGs look for when trying to relocate, and that's very important for us. So, continuing with the questions in the chat, we have one from Aisha. Thank you for your great advice. In your opinion, how important do you believe are scores relative to the rest of the application?
Mm-hmm. Like, you know, times are changing. Like, the step 1 is pass fail. I know sometimes for IMGs, they've already taken the step 1 in the past and they maybe already have a score. So, you know, if it's good and then everyone else is going to be pass fail, then that might be a plus for you. But, you know, it depends on what your score is. But a lot of times now it's just going to be shifting for step 2. And the other thing for step 2 is they increase what pass is for step 2. So, you know, make sure that you have a strong step 2, because some places are going to be looking at scores. And it just depends. Like, I feel more and more programs are going towards holistic reviews. And so it shouldn't be just looking at scores only, because I know before it'd just be like a cutoff. Like, if you don't make this score, we're not going to interview you, period. But I feel like a lot more places are looking holistically at applications. And so it's not just going to be about scores, though, you know, it's not passing is usually a red flag for some places. So take that in consideration if you're not, you know, getting as many interviews as you want. But I will tell you, at our own institute, we look at that. We look holistic. There's a lot of things that we look at. So it's not always like, oh, only the people with the best scores are going to get it. And then the other thing is, by the time someone makes it to the interview process, we don't tell the interviewers their scores. So scores aren't even looked at that point. Like, it's out of the application. No one looks, you know, it's just now culture and fit and, you know, how they answer some multiple mini interview questions and those types of things. So yeah, so then the people at least in our institute, when they're interviewing you, we don't know what your scores are.
Yeah, like that's very interesting to hear. Like, definitely some of us may have good scores, bad scores, and definitely we needed to hear what kind your perspective on this. That's a very personally, that's something that can make or break sending an application. What do you think, Deb?
Yeah, I got a question, like a personal question about the interview that we were talking before. Like, what do you think when people send an email after the interview, if it's a good idea or if it's a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea. I still think it is. I mean, some places don't expect it. Most places don't expect it, but you know, especially if it's a program that you really like, some programs might come out and say like, don't send us thank yous, don't send us emails, we're da da da. And then some, if they don't, and if it's a program that you really liked or someone that you really connected with, or you wanted to say something back about it, then do it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes. And following the questions in the chat, friend Umesh.
But
By the
to
way,
finish answering, because it shows interest sometimes.
yes,
When we're like
definitely.
doing rank, we're like, oh, this person, they emailed and they had more questions, or they, you know.
Yeah, like we have like, as I think all of us here have looked in forums, and some people say no, don't send emails, or they're going to, I don't know, like blacklist you, or some others say like, yeah, send them. So that's initially one of the reasons of why we started this interview, so we can hear it like firsthand from other lecturers, from chairs, that you can give us the perspectives, and so we can have a less stress while applying, especially as international students. We don't get this whole perspective. So thank you for giving us all this information. And yeah, following the questions with the chat, thank you, by the way, everyone who has been writing your questions. Umbesh says, how important is step 3? My year of graduation is 7 years, but my CK score is high. How will being an old grad impact my chances of matching? And will having a high score help, even with that big of a gap, since I got out of med school?
Well, first, for step 3, most US grads do not have step 3 because they do it when they're interns already. So for the most part, we're not seeing step 3 scores. But if it's there and it's high, then that's, you know, a helpful thing, and that's not going to hurt you. And then also, yes, the years from graduation, it depends on what you've done in those years is kind of what's going to matter. You know, were you already practicing in your country? Have you been here and you've been trying, you know, working in a lab, or, you know, having other experiences, or doing your life experience, you know, or working at a hospital in another setting. So it really kind of just depends. Like, can you explain what you've been doing during those gap years? And I know there's new rules on like how many years you can have now. I don't know all of the rules, but
Yeah, definitely. Some application web pages in some programs will tell you, oh yeah, if your graduation is less than 3, you can apply. If it's less than 5, if it's less than 2. So yeah, that's another very tricky, for a lack of a better word, obstacle that we have to navigate around as IMGs. But yeah, we see more questions in the chat. Deb, do you want to read another one?
yeah, but to comment on that, I feel like I wish that programs were more open about that. That way you don't waste your money and your time about, you know, who they're going to, especially if it's not a true holistic review. Are they not even going to look at anyone who graduated more than 5 years ago? Then it'd be nice if they tell you, so that way you're not wasting your time and your money and your efforts on those programs. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question, like what do programs consider like a professional red flags?
So professional red flags, I guess I would say, you know, if there is something where it's like, oh, I was arrested and I spent 5 years in jail and that's why I wasn't, you know, being a doctor, then that's probably a professional red flag. Really still, you know, people, how you present yourself and what you put on social media. You know, I'm on social media, and for the most part, it's wonderful and engaging to, you know, interact with students. But if you could, you know, just be careful what's out there. Not that programs are like going and looking you up or anything, but, you know, stuff can come out from that. Again, multiple failures of boards or failures of rotations is probably would be considered red flags. So those are probably things that.
Thank you for that. Like honestly, sometimes we're like navigating this gray zone of what is red flag, what is not really a red flag, and how much does it weight on an application. So Dipendra, and again, if I say any name incorrectly, feel free to open your mic and tell me. So Dipendra here has a really nice question. He said, first of all, hi, Dr. Gutierrez. Thank you for providing really valuable advice. I'm interested in medical education and was wondering if you had any advice for a person interested in medical education within PM&R. Do you recommend focusing on programs with medical education track, or should one focus more on getting matched and one can focus in medical education following residency via programs like PAL and such?
So awesome for being interested in medical education. I will tell you now, I would be like, try to match, just match. It's so hard now. It's hard for everyone, right? Getting in, 900 applicants, 500 spots, something like that in PM&R. So, and actually we're doing a research paper where we're looking at trends for like MDs, DOs, IMGs, and even for IMGs, the trend of IMGs being able to match is going in a downwards, slant. Because when I was in my residency class was like a quarter or a third of the residents in my class were IMGs, and now it's like you're seeing that fewer and fewer in some of the residencies. But if you're interested in medical education, then put that in your statement, especially if they have a track, because then again, that shows them that you know about their program and that you have that interest and that's something that you'd want to do. So you let them know, you make that specialized personal statement where you talk about their medical education track. And then the other thing, once you get in a residency, most residencies are going to want to cater to their residents, and most places have GME offices that have tracks. So we may not even, I think even on our own, we have a program for clinical education tracked for residents that are interested in medical education, and I don't even know if it's on our website, so it's a question that you can ask because it may be at a program that you don't even know exists. So we had someone do it last year for the first time, and we have someone doing it this year for the second time. And so kind of get in and if not, then also get involved in the societies. The AAP is especially, the academic society. If you go to the meeting, every meeting has a track that's like education and administrative, and you can go to hear those lectures that are around, medical education and learn about medical education even when you're a resident.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because I think that having these different interests, how can we show our interest? How can we show them to programs? But yeah, like since we've talked about personal statements, which we're very thankful for that. And our next question would be, what would you advise students and trainees looking forward to applying to the PM&R programs? Like, what is something that you would advise would be the most important in the application? Like, not only how to model it, but what should they be looking forward to?
So when let me see if I'll answer it how I think I'm understanding the question, and then you can see if there's anything more you want to hear. But, when you're looking to apply for programs, really look at, places where you'd want to be, places where you could see yourself flourish and be successful. And if you think like, I hate the cold, don't go to Minnesota, because then you're going to be miserable. Or I need light all the time or else I get depressed, don't go to Seattle. You have to also think about what you have or your family. Do you have family and you have children and you're going to have to you have 6 kids, then maybe New York's going to be an expensive place to live. If you have 6 kids and you're going to be really struggling and having food insecurities and housing insecurities, then you have to consider those things when to apply. So you have to where is going to be a place where I'm going to feel like I'm going to be supportive, but I'm going to be able to live. That's what sometimes IMGs come with different experiences, different lived experiences, different family backgrounds, education, etc. that may limit where that they can be. So, don't waste all your money on those kinds of places, but ones that you feel like would be supportive to your education and your family and everything else that you want. So that's part of my answer. Did that kind of go?
Yeah, we're looking forward to that because since we specifically for IMGs, many of us apply to 150 programs, and sometimes we're like, wherever they take me, we don't. Sometimes we don't really see geographically, or for example, if I don't really love cold, as you said, why would I try to get into Minnesota if I'm going to be freezing? So that's a very good perspective that you have, and we have talked about now personal statement, LORs, interviews, red flags. But I would like to know if there is like one thing that we definitely shouldn't do. Like if you have ever that experience of like, oh, this is a really bad experience with this candidate, please, next candidates don't do this.
Mm-hmm. What should you not do? I'll do it more like what's still good to do, and
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because
maybe it'll
maybe
be on a maybe it'll be on a spectrum, like do this, but don't do it too much. So one thing is like if there's a program that you're interested in and you want, it's okay to be engaged with them, to, reach out to the residents for questions, tell them you have an interest in their program. That's sometimes what some people are afraid to do, but it helps the program know as well. If at the end you're like, oh, I love your program, I'm going to be ranking highly on my list. The programs can't tell you that, but you can go and tell programs that. But then you don't want to be almost like, the stalker person too much, like, so yes, let them know, engage some, but don't be at the stalker level. That's maybe one of the things that's like don't do that. So that's one thing to consider. And the other thing is look at their residency, look at what their residents are made of, or do they never have IMGs? Then, maybe ask like, what would it take to get there and to be an IMG? Or do they seem to be like, that's one of the things that they, maybe ask the program director, do you screen out for IMGs? When you do your screen, can you please let me know before I apply? That may not be a bad thing to ask without being too pushy or too, rude. The other thing is sometimes you have to consider where they train too, like where are the training places. Some of the programs may train at an active military center, and active military centers are harder to take someone who doesn't have US citizenship.
Oh, that's very true. There are some programs that I wouldn't try to explain why, but they do tell you that they don't get sponsorships, and they only accept citizenships or people with green cards. So that's a very important point too.
And it's hard for programs to come out and be like, we discriminate against IMGs, but they kind of do. You know what I'm saying? But they can't.
It's totally understandable.
Yeah. Like we don't have visas, or we can't get you at the military hospital to rotate, and that's part of your rotation. So we're not going to get you,
Okay, yeah, that's a very interesting thing because honestly, personally, I didn't know about those little nuances.
Right.
But now talking more about the residency of PM&R, what are the tracks that a resident can go to after finishing this residency? Because you do a lot of stuff. You do research on long COVID, the spasticity, neurorehabilitation. What are all these tracks that are available for all the trainees that want to come into this residency?
Yeah, so I feel like PM&R is such a diverse specialty. Like you can really go into it and find your own niche, and that people do so many different things, because I feel like our organ is function. So you're just there to help people with their quality of life and getting better. And, people in my past residents have gone into so many different things. And one thing I just even learned this year was that now PM&R residents can go do fellowships in neurocritical care afterwards. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. That's something I didn't know. I always thought that was like an anesthesiologist or a critical care doctor or, something else, but now PM&R can do it too. Other things, pain management, that's probably one of the most common things that for pain management, usually it's like PM&R, anesthesia, I guess neurology and psych could go into pain as well, but it's usually PM&R or anesthesia that are going to do pain specialties. And in our own residency, a lot of residents go into pain, and they always say PM&R is the painless path to pain because it's like less painful than anesthesia, I guess. Or I don't know, maybe someone loves anesthesia here, but in the way that, and I feel like you really learn a lot of the musculoskeletal system and physical examination skills really, really great in PM&R. And so that's one thing that makes those people better pain physicians. There is fellowships in spine and sports. There's, so year-long sports fellowships. Again, sports could be something like family medicine, pediatrics could go into sports, and orthopedics can go into sports, but PM&R can go into sports as well. There is fellowships in pediatrics. So if you want to do pediatric rehab medicine, that's one place that's a huge need. So if you still like kids and you want to see kids with developmental disabilities, cerebral palsy, anything like that, there's a huge, huge need for pediatric rehab medicine. There's brain injury fellowships, which is my specialty. There's there's a couple of spasticity fellowships, but sometimes you might get it a lot in residency, or it's not a requirement that you do it. But if you wanted to be that extra level of expert, you could do a fellowship in that. There's spinal cord injury fellowships too. So if you specifically want to see that population, some do fellowships in MS. So there's even fellowships in MS, neuromuscular medicine. So if you want to be a specialist in electrodiagnostics and taking care of patients with neuromuscular diseases, there's probably even palliative care. I know some PM&R doctors go into palliative care. Cancer rehabilitation or oncologic rehabilitation, that's another fellowship that they're working on getting even to be hopefully something that's board certified one day. And there's multiple fellowships across the countries. And then a lot of people don't do fellowships. You can just kind of make it your niche. Like you might want to go and do inpatient rehab and just take care of patients in an inpatient setting, or just open a clinic and see people who are, in any kind of outpatient clinic setting. And even that's different than across the board, depending on what you do. So big field where you kind of make it what you want. Now, some do pelvic rehab, pelvic floor medicine, and take care of women's health is a new one. I have a few friends that do women's health when it comes to PM&R and specifically focus on women issues. So like I said, if there's something that you're really passionate about, aerospace medicine, we're trying to get one of our residents to do an elective in aerospace medicine, and one of our doctors that work with us, he'd probably leave us in a minute to go to NASA and work,
That's so interesting. I had no idea. It seems like a really growing area. I love it. We got a really cool question in the chat that I like it. What was the most impactful advice that you have been given in the past?
So I think some of the most impactful advice that I've been given in the past is just going for it, even if you don't meet all the perfect criteria. So it kind of went with my chair story, where again, I didn't think oh, am I going to meet all the criteria? I'm not a professor yet. I'm not in the tenure status, but I went for it and I got it anyways. And that was first a hard lesson that I learned, because when I was just an assistant professor, so just at the, starting level, when it was time to go from assistant to associate, I was told by the faculty affairs dean at that time, he looked at my CV and everything that I'd done, and he's like, I'll give you about a 50-50 shot of actually being promoted. And I just did not think that was good enough. And I was like, I don't want to take that shot. I'm gonna just wait another year. And it happened with one of my co-workers. And they told him the exact same thing. You have a 50-50 shot of getting it. And he went for it, because they say, the thing where it's men will go for a job even though they meet 60% of the criteria, and women want to meet 100% of the criteria. So he was like, okay, that's good enough. And he made it. And obviously I didn't at that time, because I didn't even go for it, even though there was nothing to lose also at that, I was still not going to lose my job. It just, I would have had to wait another year to apply. And I did wait another so it was like a lesson, like, oh, why didn't I go for it? So the same thing is like, you know, shoot your shot, try to go for it, put your best foot forward, as long as there's not going to be like harm from it at the end.
Thank you for this. Like that's something that as women in medicine, we all need to hear, that we can aspire to big things. And yeah, definitely you miss 1%, 100% of the shots you don't take. Thank you for that comment in the chat, Yusuf. And any last advices for IMGs or even med students in the US? It's okay, that
Yeah.
you may have for us.
You know, just, you know, we need you. We need more physicians. Sometimes it seems really, really hard. I don't want you to give up. I want you to know that, you know, hopefully there's going to be a program for you that's going to meet your wants and needs and your desires of what you want to do in the future. You know, the other thing, like I said, sometimes there's lots of paths to end up doing what you want to do in the end. Like I said, like, okay, if you're like, I really want to do sports medicine and you tried to PM&R a few times, then guess what? Family medicine to do a fellowship in sports medicine, internal medicine. Like I said, there's other ways to get to that ultimate goal. And even though, you know, one door might close, another one opens, and there's a lot of other opportunities. So, you know, there's a need for physicians here. And so, you know, continue to try to be part of the physician force that we need.
Thank you so much for this advice and for so much tips and for being so inspired for me as a woman. And I love it, everything that you said. I don't know if we have any more questions in the chat. Yes.
The other thing I was going to say, kind of going along with that, is like, just remember what you bring, you know, whether it be different life experiences, different cultural experiences, language, you know, that's important.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes we as IMGs try to give like 1000%. And we sometimes say like, we shouldn't apply here because you're not going to get selected. So having someone telling us that we can, that we should go for it, that these are some advices that you can give us, even if you think they are super small, for us means the world, because we're on this path trying to accommodate ourselves into a system that's very different from where we came from. So thank you so much for your time. We have arrived to the end of our interview. Unfortunately, we would love to keep talking about all your experiences, your life in San Antonio. But yeah, we have come to an end, and we are very grateful for having you here.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Take care, everyone.